Urgoba bijadimo abo shelu kugorate. Alhamdulillah dagan kamu mumege yabo wayrabu ani gargare.
ألح وقتي بقت أعوذ الكليني يلو يزال أمير النار الله قافي النار إبادة وسو اللزو ما توقس كفون بوء اللام زد وقسيو سماما جاما تبقى لليو إيجادو إيزي كاما زال بسو كدم كتب يا جازال نت بايما أحادي بوغل
كم سمك فرلتك أعمل كامل سيوهال هنقول لزيو نحمي بيلو كم سم أهلي ذاتو يد أهلي نسال أو خذاتي تاوخا هاي خذات آيخا أبيك تنقل لي فارق ديو
نقناطيتو والله لوته وزوري بقرته سرنان وانت كانوا جنة بيشو جانا ميسا
Nisumasi matino kana amma yun wan kusa ngenya karo kusa ram tingi nam so instrument wa ega manira
أنا غشازخ بلا يداي يشو مزرب باتاي تنسيما باتاي مريد أسكشو يرس بازا غلطاي
Hi, I'm John Ridley, and welcome to Critical Content, a celebration of some of the year's most impactful documentary storytelling. Critical Content is produced by No Studios in association with The Wrap and in partnership with WISN Television in Milwaukee, Milwaukee Film, and Creative Cipher. Filmmaker Jessica Beshir was born in Mexico, and at a young age, her family moved to Ethiopia, but left when she was a teenager due to political turmoil in the country. She returned over many years and began chronicling life in and around the city of Para, and the result was the absolutely transfixing film Faya Dayi. Please welcome to this session filmmaker Jessica Beshir. Jessica,
thank you so
how are
much,
you?
John. I'm
I have
doing
to tell you,
great.
you're holding up well in all this craziness, yes?
Yes, it's been exciting.
Well, listen, Jessica, we've been doing critical content for a couple of years now, and we kind of get together and we pitch each other on films that we may not have seen and films that we think really are outstanding and worthy of really talking about this year. The film that I brought to the table, the film that I wanted to see most, the film that the moment I heard about it and saw the trailer on Criterion, I said, I have to see this film, and it did not disappoint, was your film. It is amazing. It is beautiful. It is transfixing. I really don't want to oversell this, but I have to be honest that in any mode of storytelling, whether it's documentary, whether it's narrative, your style of filmmaking, however you arrive to it, is something that I absolutely appreciate. And as I got to do my homework on you, your journey as a filmmaker was inspiring. And I don't just mean and I hope for young filmmakers, I mean this very sincerely. For someone who's been doing this for a while, you reminded me of something that somebody told me many, many, many years ago. You don't need Hollywood's permission to do the things that you want to do. And I think your film is a testament to that. So I know that's a lot coming in, but I meant it. It's an incredible film. So we got a lot to talk about. I want to talk about the film. I want to talk about what it's about. I really want to talk about your journey because it's so inspiring. But I want to start at the beginning because this film is essentially it's a journey through Ethiopia, but it's through the lens of the countries, and it's spelled Khat. But if I understand correctly, it's pronounced chat, the chat industry.
Chats.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you explain for folks who are watching what what that is, what chat is, and what that industry is, particularly in Ethiopia.
Well, John, first of all, I would love to say thank you so much for this incredibly warm welcome. I am truly honored to be here in conversation with you, someone whose work I really admire and respect so much. So thank you for inviting me to the space. Chat is a well, it's considered a sacred plant, as many plants around the world, and in its genesis plant, this chat, it's a green leaf that holds a lot of moist, and usually people chew. And this was used to be used by amirs, by Sufi moms, to attain spiritual transcendence. You know, it helped them to stay up all night in prayer and offer those prayers to their creator. And that was the use of chat in the past. You know, we're talking like transgenerational. This is an ancient leaf. But then over the years, now chat has become commodified. So for me, you know, making this film, it was sort of like documenting that process of commodification of this plant, and how many different people are engaging with it and their experience they have with it, and how over time, you know, the use of it has morphed into something else. And so for me, entering into this was having many questions about, okay, so why are we medicating so much to begin with? What happened? You know, so that is what kind of like propelled me into this 10-year journey that you see in the film.
Yeah, you talk about this plant being turned into a commodity, and I wanted to try to find a way to help people understand what that really meant. So I tried to find some numbers, and these aren't probably the best numbers. Chat was banned in the UK in 2014, but at that time, it was about $25 million worth of the leaves that were consumed annually. And in terms of amount, it was about between 2,500 or 2,800 tons of the plant every year. So this was, you talk about something that begins as something that was very spiritual. We see that in many cultures, but as you say, it has turned into something that was a commodity, and it was something that, when it became a commodity, really affected many people in and around the city of Har, in many places in Africa, but around there. I want to get to that in a second, but I do need people to understand as best they can your film, because it is, again, for me, it was an extraordinary, and it was a journey, and it was beautiful. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but on the Criterion page, which, by the way, your film is currently streaming on the Criterion channel, on the tile. First of all, if you don't have Criterion in general, you need to get it. Now's your excuse. Get it so that you can see this film. But it's listed at Criterion as being a trans-state cinema. And I just I tried to look up trans-state just as an art form, because I said, oh, great, here's a way to express an art form that I love. I couldn't find it applied anywhere else. So here's where, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is that in your opinion, is it an accurate way to describe this film that is so meditative and so beautiful and so elliptical, and really just being about immersive as much as it is about being educational?
Well, you know, something that I found, which is really incredible and wonderful, you know, for me, is the various, as you can imagine, kind of descriptors that have come about, you know, about the film. You know, there's a trans-state cinema, there's hallucination, there's all kinds of ways in which people are trying to articulate, you know, what this film is about. And it's not that one is more correct than the other. There's really like no wrong answer, because in a way, the film allows you to bring in, for you to bring in yourself and engage with you. It's an invitation. So therefore, everyone is going to have quite a different experience, I think.
Yeah, Roger Ebert, the great film critic, used to say that at its best, cinema is an apparatus for delivering empathy and delivering emotion. And one of the things I appreciated about this film is that it's such a powerful instrument for delivering emotion. I appreciate documentaries that hit you in the head with information and educate, but this was a film that you could watch and the emotion and the feeling was there. There's much I want to talk about with the film, but one of the things that impressed me, I watched the film and there is such a sense of technique and sense of self. And one would watch this film and think that this is someone who's been making films their entire lives. This is someone who is the absolute height of professional filmmaking. But I got to learn your story, and however one gets to telling a story is absolutely fine. But your journey was really a journey of self. You went to UCLA, but technically speaking, you didn't go to film school. There's a little bit of a story of how you studied a little bit of film in UCLA, and it was remarkable. Talk about that part of your journey, just a little bit. You're at UCLA. You were, I believe, a foreign student at that time, couldn't quite afford certain classes, and yet you did study film. And talk about that and an individual who was very instrumental for you in allowing you to study a little bit of film.
Yeah, well, I got to UCLA and applied, to the film school, and it became something that I was never going to be able to afford, because not only was there tuition, and I was working to pay my own tuition, so as a foreign student in the school and elsewhere. So there was no way that I was going to be able to afford, because at that time it was 8mm, 16, it was film. And the development of the film, it was on the students. So there was an incredibly amazing professor at UCLA who was also chair at the film department. His name is Teshoma Gabriel, who happens to be Ethiopian. And he was kind of like, the father figure for many, many students. The moment, you came to the cafeteria, if you saw a big circle, that means that the showman is in there, because everybody used to come and he was just a storyteller, literally you can imagine him under the tree with all the people around him, so he wrote extensively on what he called nomadic cinema. And that really, touched me a lot, because ever since I was uprooted, from Harar, from where I grew up, even though I was born in Mexico, there was just really a sense of just floating around, where is the home? There was that. And Teshoma Gabriel beautifully articulated, in a sense, sort of like a future of cinema where it's not bound by geographic space. It is what you make of it in wherever you are. It is in transit. So that really inspired me a lot. So and he said, look, it's okay if you can't, go to the film school, just go and watch a bunch of movies and do a film critical study. So that's what I did. And we basically wrote a bunch of essays on films, but I didn't know how to make the film. I didn't have a production experience. So I was trying to find a way to enter this. I came to New York. I didn't really know anyone in the industry. So just slowly I decided that I was going to teach myself. That's the way I was going to do it.
Yeah, it is absolutely remarkable, to be able to be around film and to learn from somebody who clearly had enough of a passion to allow you that space to discover certain things. You talk about being self-taught in terms of being a filmmaker, and there is someone, Fred Nelson, who was very instrumental in you deciding to start making films. Tell folks who Fred Nelson was and why he was very central to your journey as a filmmaker.
He was a propeller for me to do this, because after I came to New York, I didn't know how to find my way. I felt, pretty lost. I had just had a baby. I just felt like, wow, this possibility of making a film in Ethiopia was just like, going further and further away from me. And it was at that time when I was taking my baby to that park that, so that at the time I moved to Brooklyn. And so I'm walking around this new neighborhood, and I met, I didn't meet Fred. I saw Fred for the first time.
Wow.
Fred Nelson was this really tall, incredibly regal man that walked around, with something under his arm. But just the way in which he walked, he just so purposeful, so graceful. I would see him in the neighborhood, not knowing where he was going or what, but I was very curious about him always. I didn't really have that, to go and ask him. But one day, as I was going to the park very early in the morning, I think it was 6 a.m., I passed by one of those tunnels here in Prospect Park, and I see him under that tunnel. And I understood finally what he was doing. He had a wooden board that he would carry around, wrapped in a black plastic bag. And on that wooden board, he would tap. He would tap by himself, just not for show. It was his practice. And he would just be like the most joyful person under that tunnel. And for me, when I saw that, it just moved me to the core. I didn't know why, but it moved me, and I started to go more often until we met, we became friends, and I really, Fred is the one who came into my life by doing what he was doing, that inspired me, because I thought, okay, look at this man. He's walking around with his wooden board and doing what he loves. That could be you. You can get your camera and just go and do what you love. It was just a direct message for me. That's why I wanted to make a short film, with him, because I really wanted to honor him and thank him for giving me that message.
When you met Fred, when you made that first film, had you already started making Faya Dayi? Because that was it was 10-year process of making this film. This was not you just going out and making a film. It was 10 years. So at that point, had you already started making the film, but not really realized that you were going to make the film? Or you met Fred and you said, you know what, there's a story to be told, and I'm the individual who needs to tell this story?
That's what happened. I had not started making Faya Dayi. That's when I got a little camera, and Fred was my first person to film. I asked him, and he said, sure, you do you and I do what I do. Sure, you can film me. And that's how I started filming, with a very small camera. It was like a video camera, like just a video camera. And that's when I started filming, I realized, my God, this could be the film. And then that's when I went and I got a camera, and I started going to Ethiopia. Also, when I first went to Ethiopia, actually, I took my video camera, and that's when I started to film my grandmother, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, who was getting very old. And so for me, I really needed to film her, because I needed to bring her message to my father, who was in Mexico, was far away from her. And in that way, there was a certain exchange, and a very, emotional exchange. So sort of like filming for me was always just like an emotional need, an emotional connection that I felt I could express, with the image, starting from my grandmother, whether it was those messages or later on, with Fred.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate is that there really feels like, and I don't mean this in a gooey way, but there really is this spiritual component to the film, that it really is about connecting and with lives, with emotions, with culture. Now some of it is very tough because it is about young people who feel disconnected with their circumstances and want to leave the country. Talk about that a little bit, because on one hand, it's so much about a love letter from your grandmother to your father. In some ways, I think it mirrors perhaps your circumstances, having to leave a place that you felt very connected to. I'm just very curious because the film is not necessarily about any one thing, but it expresses so many things. So as someone who is coming to make a film, and it's over a 10-year period, for you, was there any particular path in the narrative, or was it more about just capturing the spirit, the moods, and the emotions of things that you were seeing and feeling?
Well, thank you for saying that. You know, at the beginning, going there for me was truly about, capturing life, life as in the expression of life in any form with anyone that was around me, whether it was a friend, a family member, or just someone that I met. When I first went, I really felt that I was kind of like replenishing all of those things that I had missed out for such a long time. And also, it was a moment uh, of research. It was a moment of research, because when I say research, it's, I left as a teenager, and coming back as an adult, it was a reckoning with what I was seeing, but also going deeper, because when I went there, yes, of course, like things, the economy evolves around chat. It's a very complex issue. Why? Because on the one hand, it it employs an innumerable amount of people. It's just so many people, but at the same time, people also are not working because of it. So there is that. But for me, what I wanted was to hear from the farmer. I wanted to hear from the land. And nobody knows the land better than the farmer. I never felt like I wanted to go and have an interview with, I don't know, some head, because it doesn't matter. I am on the ground, what can they tell me? And not only that, the further I went into research, um, and of course I was filming the people that I was interviewing, the more I started to understand about the historical context of this plant, about the socio-political context of the Oromo people on the land, and what was happening, and historically learning about the profound marginalization, political, economic, social. And so, it was not just anymore about a plant. It was about people and what that socioeconomic marginalization was creating. So there was another big context, added, onto the film, and that is something that came about, through the years, until when was it, like around 2015, the Oromo youth. Most of these are like the sons of all of these farmers that I am meeting, that I'm having a communion with. They rose in a peaceful protest that they sustained for about 3 years. Incredibly courageous, because they no longer felt like they had anything to lose, because their lands were being confiscated left and right. They rose up against the master plan of Addis, which the government had instituted. They wanted to widen the city of Addis, and therefore taking away the land of of the Oromo fathers, and the youth were not going to have it. It didn't matter that thousands and thousands died,
Yeah.
So all of these, it's again, it was a country in transit. Uh, these things happened through the years.
Well, one of the things that you were talking about that I found very interesting in this film, it was the socio-political aspects of it. It was how this economy has changed these folks. And there are these, you see it in country to country where the economics are driven not by boom. We take it for granted in this country that we can have boom economies, that it can be tech, it can be automotive, it can be in these different places, but where there's a singular economy and the effect that it has on people. And it's not necessarily positive. There are things that you talk about in the film, how it changes the culture, how it changes the land, how it changes people's connection to it, how even the plant itself went from being something that was incredibly spiritual to something that is, just a drug that anesthetizes people in certain ways that are not necessarily positive. And one of the things that I really appreciated, because this is such a complex film, both in terms of what it deals with sociopolitically and what it deals with in terms of mood and emotion. And as I was watching this film in a very beautiful way, I found myself getting lost in it. And I thought to myself, well, as a filmmaker, how do you approach this? And you said something that I really found just beautiful, that in every step of the way, the story itself was showing me the way when I felt completely lost. If you can, I don't know, with something that is so beautiful that there's a way to contextualize just the way you navigate it. You certainly talked about in terms of the politics of it. But in the filmmaking itself, there are moments that are very gentle. There are moments that are meditative. I once learned, I think late in life as a filmmaker, from editors. I started as a writer, became a director, maybe not. But I learned to really respect editing. And when I go into a project, I really think about the end game. I say, okay, as an editor, if I was an editor, how do I get out of a situation? Was the editorial process something that you thought about early on, or after 10 years of gathering this footage, did you go, okay, now, my God, I have all this. How do I get any kind of a narrative, whether it's direct, indirect, whether it's meditative? How do you get any narrative out of all of 10 years of footage? What was your approach in that regard? Did you start at the end, or did you find the ending throughout this process?
Thank you for that question. I feel like this film and every aspect of this film has been a process. I trust the process so much. Starting from even filming, having that camera and understanding that relationship that I'm having, with people, how I'm responding to what they are, giving me. My relationship with a lot of the amirs around Hara is called, they call it the City of Saints. These are very highly spiritual people that truly, I can almost say that they showed me the way, because they taught me so many things that really served me well for me in the way I prefer to make a film, or because they spoke a lot about time. They spoke a lot about space. They spoke so much about transcendence, and in a way, even from the filming process, about how I somehow needed to be still, how I needed to trust the process, how I needed to trust that instinct that was going to inform me, that I needed to let go of control and allow, that spirit to come in and guide. And that's what I tried to do. That's really what I tried to do, and trust the process. When I was filming specifically, you can tell. You can tell from the texture. You can tell from the space. You can tell something is happening. If I told you that I had exactly this vision of how I was going to edit it, it would not be true, because again, I really, really trust that process. And the editing process was one of the most beautiful things, because that's when all of the ideas that I had somehow coalesced. that's when we really got to try them. And really put them to the test. And in a way, I was thinking about allowing these images and these stories transcend that constriction of time and also of space per se.
One of the things, and I want to talk a couple of technical things in this film that are really extraordinary. One in particular, this is a monochromatic film. This is a black and white film. For me, again, I love that choice. There's something about monochrome that it just really actually, in my opinion, focuses on story, on elements, and all of those things. There's something interesting, though, that you'd said about Hara, the city. It's a very colorful place. It's one of the most colorful places you'll ever see in the world. It bursts with color. It's gorgeous and beautiful. Here's this beautiful place, this colorful place, and yet you choose to make a monochromatic film. Talk just for a second, if you will, about that choice, about taking something that is beautiful and colorful and saying, hey, I want to extract that because it's actually, at least in your opinion, and in my opinion, incredibly effective, that making it monochrome was going to aid and help and elevate the storytelling.
Yeah, I felt that the monochrome, one, it was going to help me focus in that interiority that I was trying to get at, that interiority of experience, of emotional experience that people were having in their relationship with the plant. That is definitely, one thing. But another reason for this monochromatic choice is that I feel that it has so it allows you to it brings out the textures even more so than when you have color. You can focus on the textures and you can say so much more, I feel, with this monochromatic. But not just that, also, like I said, yes, Harar is very colorful. That was not the story that I was trying to tell. The story comes with a lot of melancholy to see what these youth were going through in their lives, and people making very tough decisions at very young age. The kid like Muhammad, when I met, he was only 12 years old, and now he was 14 and he was already making decisions to go in the desert where a lot of them end up getting used for organ trafficking. There's that. There were so many, stories. I mean, like the Qerro youth, the Oromo youth. They call them Qerro or Carre for the women. These are the youth that truly sacrificed so much in order to bring about change. And that's when the former prime minister resigned, and we got the new one. And they still are feeling like their fight is not yet, they haven't found an answer back from the government, from what they're looking for. So all of these things, I feel like the black and white was holding it better, that sense of true melancholia that people are feeling at this moment in time.
Oh, I absolutely know. And one of the things that I really appreciate about this film, you talk about the young men and just their internal monologues as they talk about leaving the country or how they would get out. We call them over here, the coyotes, people who's going to get you across the border and things like that. And these are kids, they're about the age of our sons. And to hear them having to make these choices and feel like that's the only choice they could make. This was a film that was so beautiful, and yet in the moments where you just feel these decisions, and it's like the only decision they could make. Not about, where am I going to go within this country to do things, the normal choices that young people would make that you would hope. Am I going to go to college? Am I going to get a job? Am I going to travel? that's one of the things that was really impactful to me, was that juxtaposition of this beauty with these very difficult choices that these young people had to make, and then really thinking about how do I contextualize that in my own life? What would I think if my kid had to say, I've got to flee the country? It was beautiful, it was powerful. The other thing that really struck me, particularly as I began to learn that you were very much a self-taught filmmaker. It's one thing to want to direct a film, it's another thing to have technical proficiencies in doing it. And you taught yourself to be a cinematographer. And there was a moment, there were a couple of moments in the film. It's one thing to be out in fields and there's light and absorbing it. There are any number of moments that are in the dark, where you're filming things. And, it's just difficult to film in the dark. It's even more so. You really didn't have a crew. You're pretty much out there by yourself filming. And there's a moment in an interview where you talk about, I think, your best friend while you're out there, which was your 50mm lens. And it was so amazing to hear you not just talk about technical aspects, but just how this lens was your go-to and your friend and your buddy when you're out filming. Just talking a little bit about two things, if you can, just learning the craft of cinematography on your own, because it is an amazing craft to learn. But then I just would love for you, if you can, to talk about that lens in particular, because to hear you talk about that, like, this was your 9-iron, this was your Excalibur, was so beautiful. I would just love for you to share that with the audience.
Thank you so much. I have to say that this film, truly, now in retrospect, it was an invitation for life for me, an invitation to live what I have been wanting to do for so long. And when I realized that I didn't know anyone and I was going back and forth to Ethiopia, and I tried to speak to some producers, but nobody would pay attention and nobody wanted to know anything about, Ethiopian farmers. So, I mean, when I realized that that I was going to have to do it, truly, it was such a relief. And it was such an amazing invitation to do things, and I love to, I'm a learner. I'm a student. I love to be a student. So, that meant that I had to learn so much, and of course, it was never easy. Nothing was ever easy, but those were the places where I felt in complete peace, and it gave me so much joy to find out about, I became like a camera geek. I just needed to know every single lens, and you need to know every single color spectrum, and I needed to know everything about directing. Like I had to I had a schedule where I had to learn, okay, today is going to be like, okay, this time about directing, and, the rest of the time is going to be the camera, and like that, So, that was a beautiful, journey for me. And I did it by doing. I just bought my camera, started filming Fred Nelson, who inspired me, and then from there, I took it. One thing that I have to say, also, it had to be something that I could afford, So my precious lens was my prime, f1.4, and that was my fastest lens, So that's why I could use that during the day, during the night, and it truly. By shooting, at night, I learned so much about where to position myself, how I wanted to be, where it felt. It's not because it was right or wrong, where it felt good, So shooting the people that I was having, relationships with, where it was the farmers or my friends or, or some family members, it was about this relationship that they were giving me, and just framing something was like healing. Shooting, it was it was part of that healing. It truly felt that way.
Yeah, there was a quote that you gave, and to me, it really summed up how you were able to make this extraordinary film. And that was, filming it was a way to respond to what was moving me. And I will be honest, this is it really is one of the most moving films, not just documentaries. This is one of the most moving films, one of the most meditative films that I've seen in quite a while. And I have to be honest, Jessica, your story as a filmmaker, as an individual, as a person, is just remarkable. And as I said, what you were talking about can apply to a young filmmaker, but as somebody who's been doing this for a while, I feel, and I mean this, very renewed and energized to go out and just do the things that you want to do, and people will flow to it. I really believe that. Jessica, the film is remarkable. I cannot thank you enough for joining us and sharing your story, but for making this film. And I will say, I am so excited to see whatever it is you're going to do next. The name of the film, Faya Dayi. It is currently streaming on the Criterion channel. I highly suggest that people get the Criterion channel just to have. But as I said before, if you need an excuse to get it now, this is the reason. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us on Critical Content.
John, thank you. You're so generous. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here in your show. Thank you.
Again, I cannot wait to see what you do next. This has been Critical Content. It is produced by No Studios. We deeply appreciate you joining us for this session.
Six weekends with major artists.
The Panthers were the security and kids were sitting up on the trees. I was nervous. I didn't expect a crowd like that. Something very important was happening.
Har du nogensinde fortalt din livshistorie før?
Nej. Vi skal ud. Det er nu. Lige dårligt samvittighed, at min bror han bliver tilbage. Vi flygtede med menneskesmuglerne.